Hey guys, so in this home practice session, we're going to bring it back to the basics and we're going to explore Tadasana and Dandasana. But I'd like to focus on specifically the pelvic action in our Tadasana, mountain pose, and in our Dandasana, which is staff pose. Tadasana is the foundation for all of the standing postures. Dandasana is the foundation for all of the seated postures. So if you can start to bring awareness and cultivation of the pelvic movement into these asanas, it will support you through most of your standing poses, most of your seated poses, and beyond. And then it starts to also inform some of the other asanas and how to work properly. So let's start with Tadasana, mountain pose. And I'm going to show you side view. So in Tadasana, you stand with your feet together traditionally, or you can have your feet separated. Now I'd like you to watch the position of the legs. Often we tend to stand a little bit forward in the legs without even realizing. This is kind of how our everyday stance is. What Iyengar yoga helps to inform you of is bringing that awareness into how am I standing. So you can see I'm standing more on the front toe mounds of my foot. As soon as I start to bring the weight back towards the heels, see how the alignment of the legs changes. Okay, and then we can of course press the thighs back and we can do some other things. But now I'd like you to watch the pelvis. So often we have pelvis tilting this way. This is common for a lot of women. Or we have pelvis tilting this way. So what I'd like you to try and focus on is how can I get a neutral pelvis and continue that neutrality in my standing work. So when you have neutral pelvis, what happens is from the pubis region up to the navel, that starts to move in and up. And then the tailbone area, so the back of the pelvis, that starts to lengthen down. So it starts to move in and down. But of course, if you tuck too much, then you can see now we're getting out of the neutral pelvis. And if we lift this up too much, then you can see how we're getting out of the neutral pelvis. So when you're in neutral pelvis, you'll feel that the front of the pelvis, the back of the pelvis, they are parallel with one another. And if that can be your foundation that's stacked right over top of the heels and then stack your shoulders directly over the pelvis, you've kind of got these three areas that you can stack in line. And then yes, you can adjust the limbs and there's other movements that we can create, but if you start with that, you've got it. Okay, and then with our seated poses, so you can see I have a couple of blankets here. You can use blankets or towels, and some may not need anything. When we go into our seated work, same sort of principles apply. So often if hamstrings are tight, then they start to pull on the back, and this can start to happen. You see how there's a rounding of the back. Now if you're to imagine what your pelvis is like, or look at your pelvis, feel your pelvis, you can see how there's actually a tipping action that's happening. And then what can also happen is often we can tip this way. This is a little bit more difficult, but some people who are hyperflexible, they can really start to spill out. So the whole lower abdomen starts to kind of spill out of the pelvis. So instead, we're looking for a neutral pelvis. Now this can be a little bit difficult as well, especially if there is the tightness in the hamstrings. So this is where we start to bring in support, our props. So you can start with one blanket, two blankets, see how much you need so that you can bring that neutrality to the pelvis. And you can see I'm not sitting way back on the support, and I'm not sitting too far forward on the support. Okay, so I ground the center of the sit bones down. And when I get this neutral pelvis, again, you'll feel that you can start to lift the chest, and it's easier to stack the shoulders on top of the pelvis. And so then you have this neutrality where the front pelvis and the back pelvis are parallel with one another. So those are some hints and some tips to go into, you can take into your practice with you. And you'll find that having that awareness just helps you to cultivate a different action in the asanas. Okay, of course, let me know if you have any questions, and happy practicing. Namaste.